capitalism could not survive in a culture dominated by mysticism and altruism.
The world is changing. The age of the consumer is over.
Stand up for freedom, no matter what the cost. It can help to save your soul and maybe your country.
Do you understand the forces shaping events in the world around you? Do you want to know the answers or just the issues? Do you know the secrets of prosperity economics? Live from Salt Lake City and at freecapitalist.com across the nation, you're listening to the free capitalist himself, Rick Koerber.
I want to welcome everybody formally to this episode of Free Capitalist Radio. You have to bear with us. We're still working through some technical difficulties, broadcasting here from Liberty Reef. We are going out now over 88.1 on the FM band from Liberty Reef Radio Network. We welcome all of our listeners on the radio band. We also welcome our listeners on Uber Conference who are participating via web and computer. Beautiful thing about modern technology is no matter where you are, we can get the power of Rain on Radio to you. And so make sure to invite your friends and tell them about Free Capitalist Radio, no matter where they're at. If they're not in the range of Liberty Reef Radio on FM 88.1, there's no excuse they can't participate on Uber Conference, or if they've got a mobile device on Periscope. You just have to have them follow at Free Capitalist, and they'll get a notice every time we get on Periscope and get started. So for now, those are the three ways you can listen to Free Capitalist Radio live every night at 10 o'clock in Mountain Time. Now, if you're on Periscope, you got to keep those hearts coming. Keep your comments coming. That's the best way to give me feedback. If you're on Uber Conference and you've got a question, the best way to do that is to type it into the right-hand menu, and I'll have Kimball watching that, and Kimball will tell you if you've got questions. We may even be able to do call-ins. I'm not sure if we can do call-ins. We can try it. But we're still working on the technology. The best thing we've got going is we've got the show going. We're back up online. We've got a great audience. Had over 1,000 listeners to our first episode last night, which sounds small compared to the million listeners Free Capitalist Radio used to have. But let me tell you, when we started Free Capitalist Radio, I'd be surprised if there were 1,000 people listening 10 years ago on episode 1. And so it's in your court, my friends. If you find this scintillating brain on radio, you've got to help us build this. A lot of people ask me, what can we do to build the freedom movement? What do we have to do to be successful in this? And your first assignment from the free capitalist himself is get your friends, even your socialist friends, to get on here. We're doing it at 10 o'clock at night. Your kids should be in bed. You're at the end of the day. You're thinking about, you're reflecting on what's happened in the day. You're familiar with the news stories, so you're ready, you're prepared. What better way to end your day than with some good brain medicine? It's like warm herbal tea for the soul, for the spirit, for the psyche, right? All right, hey, Connie, welcome there on Periscope. We've got a great show tonight. I think some of you probably saw the little teaser we placed on Facebook. We're going to talk about several news items, and we're also going to talk about kind of a continuation of the episode from yesterday, talking about how we can build the liberty movement and what we can do. We'll start off today by talking about some news items, particularly the story about universities like Vassar having staff members shredding the Constitution of the United States to make students feel better. And we got into some interesting conversations online with that earlier. Some of you probably saw that. And by the way, that's another way for you to participate on the show every day, is when we put out those teasers on Facebook and we tell you, hey, here's kind of the main theme of the show coming up. You know, you can engage in a conversation there. You can ask questions there. And you can start that conversation that we continue here, and we will be able to do live call-ins, and we'll try it tonight. But here, if not tonight, tomorrow. If not tomorrow, the next day, in the very near future. Our technology is gearing up quickly. Matter of fact, for those of you who missed the show last night, or who would like a replay of the show last night, we are just crunching the uploaded YouTube version of the show and the iTunes podcast version of the show, and we'll have that published here just as soon as we're done with the show. Without Israel, we're a little short-handed. Remember back in the day, we had the very competent and capable Israel Curtis, and maybe some of you who've got good connections can persuade him a little bit, free capitalist style, to get back on board. We're in sore need of a good audio fella, and there's nobody better than Israel Curtis. But in the meantime, Kimball and I are going to make it happen because we are producers of the first order, which means if it's going to be, it's up to me, right? And there's no excuses. We're going to get it done. If you saw the technology we had going on here between this microphone, between our FM transmitter, between our Facebook going on, and our video production facility, and our Periscope going on, hey, even this very building that we're broadcasting from, the new Free Capitalist headquarters, we literally have built with these hands, my friends, because we're producers. Now, some of you have forgotten what it means to be a producer, and we're going to give you a little bit of lesson every day here with some Brain on Radio. So, in case you forgot, there's one requirement if you're going to be listening to Free Capitalist Radio, and you got to do it every day. It's time to wake up and turn your brain on, because we're going to talk about the principles of prosperity, prosperity economics, and the basic cause of liberty. And there is no better time than today to commit yourself to dive one step deeper, 1 hour longer, and one big leap further intellectually into the cause of liberty. It is where happiness, peace, and prosperity are found, my friends. Now, I want to talk to you about this story. Just, it hit the news today, and some of you, like me, kind of a news junkie, and we read. One more housekeeping item. You'll notice that today it will be one more day without bumps. So, hallelujah, no commercials, because the Free Capital is just paying for that time on the FM bandwidth. But probably starting tomorrow, you're going to have to put up with some bumpers because, we want to make some money on Free Capitalist Radio. We don't want to be paying some money. And by the way, if you want to advertise on Free Capitalist Radio, you better hit me up and give me a jingle because we've got a very loyal network of listeners and liberty-minded friends. So if you're interested in advertising on Free Capitalist Radio, drop me an email and or go to Facebook and drop me a Facebook message. But today will probably be the last day of bumper-free Free Capitalist Radio, unless we want to celebrate at some point in the future. So with that said, let me say one other thing about the bumpers. On the YouTube version, you'll notice that you're getting the full introduction and the full end. For those of you who are on Periscope and those of you who are on Uber Conference, I know the production values are a little low. Don't worry. We're going to get this all coordinated. Stick with capitalism. In the beginning, free markets are a little messy, right? Because individuals have to work out how they get things done. But in the end, they make things abundant, inexpensive, and prosperous. And that's what we're doing here with the ideas of freedom and liberty. So let me talk about a couple of things going on in the world today. A couple news stories that I think capitalist-minded people ought to be paying attention to. The first one is this story about the Veritas group who, these are the people, the O'Keefe fellow who did the Planned Parenthood videos, they did the Acorn videos, and he's now done some videos that he released today where they sent in reporters disguised as students at these really, expensive colleges and universities where they have this diversity mindset. Because in the progressive America, where we all respect each other and we want to value diverse points of view, we want to make sure nobody gets hurt, right? Make sure there are safe places. Now, we're going to talk about at some other time whether it's possible to ever have an intellectually safe. The enemy of freedom is intellectual safety. Okay? There is no such thing in the cause of liberty as intellectual safety. It's physical safety. But they get it wrong. They use physical force to enforce intellectual safety. It is a bait and switch, my friends. So when you hear people talking about diversity and tolerance, okay, that should cause a little switch on the side of your head to wake up and turn your brain on. Just push it and recognize it's a bait and switch. Instead of protecting, you and everybody else from physical force and coercion, what they're doing is they're exerting physical force and coercion to protect so-called you from, mental pain and anguish. Because the idea that we should all have free expression in the world of quote-unquote diversity stops when that free expression causes you to have hurt feelings. Let me just tell you, Free Capitalist Radio, for as long as we have breath in these lungs, is going to be rattling even the cages of our friends, because freedom means thinking. Freedom means taking ownership for the ideas that motivate you. Freedom means looking around the world and deciding you're going to conquer, you're going to advance, you're going to progress, you're going to help, you're going to create value. And that starts here. And then it connects here. And the capitalists are the thinking, loving people in mankind. The socialists are the deceivers who talk about diversity, who talk about equality, but the very means that they pursue are the devilish means of force and destruction. So you got this counselor at Vassar, and he got a nice girl, comes up to her and says, well, these people were at our campus, and they were passing out copies of the Constitution, and that's such a hateful document. It causes me to feel violated. And she brings in, this handbook, this pocketbook copy of the Constitution, and this staff member at Vassar College, and they actually did about several other universities as well. This staff member listens very empathetically, like, oh, yes, I'm so sorry. We want everyone to be safe. We certainly don't want any ideas to cause you any harm. And this woman starts talking about how, they need to do something, and they brainstorm about what are they going to do, and the girl says, well, could we shred it? And the gal's like, yeah, that's a good idea. And the last of the video shows them they go over to the shredder, and they're tearing out page by page by page of the Constitution and shredding it, so that this woman can have what they call this kind of cathartic rehabilitation or recovery from the violence of the Constitution, of being exposed to the Constitution. That is the dumbest thing, and everybody with a brain knows it's dumb. These people involved know it's dumb, but there's a deeper agenda going on. Now, I have to tell you, I showed this to Jewel, and I had her watch the video, and she started laughing and saying, is this a joke? Well, it is a joke, but it actually really was an undercover sting because it was trying to expose this nonsense agenda going on at colleges and universities. And it's in the news because they want you to get mad and they want you to get upset because the Constitution's being ripped up. But it's for reasons you might not think. And since you all are turning your brain on here, we're going to talk about the next level, the second line, right? I know some of you might be upset that the Constitution is being torn and shredded, but that's actually not the problem, right? There's a fellow on Facebook who said to me, oh, if you love the Constitution, you'll recognize that, people have the right to shred the Constitution, the copies of the Constitution. It took a little bit of restraint, I have to admit, took a little bit of restraint not to just open up a can of, mental whoop ass on this guy. Oh, sorry, I didn't say that. Mental,
you're on the air. You're on the air.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Forget I am broadcasting. We do have to worry about the government censors on the Vietnamese side of the border.
You don't want them to get you on this.
Yeah. Sorry. Can you not say whoop ass on Federal Airways? I don't know. Well, anyways, we'll have to open up a can of something on these people, but I restrained myself. I didn't do it, so that's okay. And what I said was, look, I understand, and I might agree with you, that people may have the right to tear up or shred copies of the United States Constitution, especially if it was their own property. That's not the point, right? You can tell we live in a tyrannical day and age in our society when every conversation immediately dives down to, do you have a right? Do you have a right? Do you have a right? Oh, yeah, sorry, Brad. Damn those FCC regulations anyway. I think you could say damn, dam it up, the river. Now, stop it, hold them up. Yeah,
right, that's what you mean. Stop the FCC regulations.
That's what whoop ass means, too. It's like whooping your donkey. Yeah, that's right. Whooping your donkey. Right. Wait, that looks like a bad dance. Okay, stop. See, there's a problem. Back in the day, there was no video with Free Capitalist Radio, so
I don't know that I want to see you.
I don't know. I might have been doing that before. Don't get all Cohen versus California on us. Yeah. Hey, you be careful. You be careful. Now, here's the point. Believe it or not, in a civilized society, the first question isn't, do you have a right to do it? Meaning, there are all kinds of things you have the right to do that aren't great ideas, that aren't socially acceptable, that shouldn't be socially acceptable, that aren't civil. And just because you have the right to do them, I also have the right to express my opinion about you doing them. That's when we actually engage in discussion. So I said to this friend, I said, okay, freedom-loving friend, I'm engaging in the discussion. You had the right to initiate the discussion by tearing up the Constitution. And I'm not mad at you for tearing up the Constitution. I don't care. I mean, you don't know the Constitution anyway. You might as well tear it up. You don't ever read it or study it. So, you're not hurting my feelings at all, you imbecile. But, not you, but your brother. I mean, what good is it, It reminds me, I got to take a little segue. It reminds me, I used to teach Sunday school. And I got in a little trouble one time. And a few of you know this story. And well, I debate whether to take this segue here or not. But so I was teaching Sunday school, and there was a girl in this class. This is back when I was single. And there was a girl in the class I was very interested in asking out. See, and so I was trying to teach all intelligent, and I'm going and I'm getting real passionate. You can imagine free capitalist Sunday school, right? And I'm sure I'm being impressive in all this. And there's this cowboy who comes into the classroom, and he was trying to out-cowboy me a little bit. And he was being real hard-headed. You can't do that, by the way. You can't. Well, that's not true. Out here at Liberty Reef, I've met a few men who have out-cowboyed the free capitalists. But I'm working on that. There are not many people that can out-cowboy the free capitalists. There are a few. That's another story for another day. But he was trying to out-cowboy me, and he's being real stubborn. And I was asking each member of the class to go through and read this particular verse of Scripture. And we got to this fellow, and he read this verse of Scripture, and he says, but I disagree with that. And I thought, well, maybe I didn't make myself...
Disagree with the free capitalists?
Yeah, well, no, but see, that's what I thought. No. Well, you might disagree with me, but certainly you're not disagreeing with the Scripture, right? I mean, you have the right to disagree with the Scripture, but, in Sunday school class, that's probably not the best forum to announce your disagreement with the Scripture, but nevertheless, you have the right to do it. And so I wanted to make clear that he was probably just disagreeing with me, and I said, okay, well, you might disagree with me, but here, let's read this other Scripture. So I had him read this other Scripture. And he read it, and he goes, and I disagree with that too. And I said, well, so you're telling me you don't disagree with me, you disagree with what's written in the book. And he said, yeah. And I said, oh, but do you believe that book to be the Word of God? He said, yes. I said, do you believe it's true? He said, yeah. And I walked over, I grabbed it was a missionary version of the Book of Mormon, the blue one, $2. And I violated principle. Here, I admit it. And I grabbed the book out of his hand. I was so upset because he was ruining my mojo, And I took that page and I tore it out of the Scripture and I threw it in the garbage. And, this whole class of young single adults was waiting for me to get struck by lightning, And I threw it in the garbage and I handed it back to him and he was kind of, still-faced. And he says, what'd you do that for? I said, well, now you can still say you believe that book is true with integrity. Because, I got rid of the parts you disagree with. Well, anyway, I don't know that I made a great impression on anybody except for myself in that day. And so I went on to the next meeting, to priesthood meeting, and I'm sitting there minding my own business, trying to pretend innocently like nothing had happened. And next thing you know, I see this face peeking through the window, pointing, come here, and I had to go down to the principal's office, the bishop's office, and had a fun conversation with the bishop and his counselors, who asked me to replay the story blow by blow. And I have to admit, they were a lot more loving and kind as they laughed and humored me. And they said, oh, yeah, we know brother so-and-so. Boy, did you really grab his Book of Mormon and tear out the page? And then one counselor says, I think you probably owe him an apology, and you probably ought to replace his Book of Mormon. I said, what for? He doesn't believe it anyway. And I said, all right, I'll go do that. And then they said, now, we're going to ask you to not teach for a couple of weeks, and please don't ever tear up scriptures in Sunday school again. And why do I tell you that? Because, I don't know, it was a good story. But the point is, it's not the things on the paper, it's not the paper itself that's the value, it's the truth that they speak, it's the communication, it's the message, right? And so, burning up the Constitution or ripping it up or shredding it or whatever, it doesn't do any damage to the meaning or the truth of it. It's a symbolic expression of speech, and certainly, as long as it's your property, you have the right to do that. But here was the point of the story. The point of the story was the justification for why they were doing something that would normally be seen as, pretty unprofessional in the education world. tearing up, burning books, tearing up documents. I mean, you're not tearing up the Constitution of, the state of Libya, which I would guess would probably be pretty offensive to some people. And so the point is the context. And we live in a world where everybody's a context dropper. And, statistically speaking, and they're all brain off. And the way they make points and win arguments is they talk about things out of context. And I said to my friend, it's the context that matters. First and foremost, it's the justification that somehow the implied argument is we should tear up the words that hurt us. Now think about that. We should tear up and prohibit, basically, the words. Those words can't exist in our space because of your feelings. Right? See, that's a flawed idea, that in a free society, we're all free to have our ideas and our feelings not injured. And the reason it's important is because you, even my friends out there, you've been trained, taught, and educated that you have a right not to have your feelings hurt, and that's not true. Right. Not even in loving relationships. Sometimes the most loving and committed relationship is the relationship where you're allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough, and somebody else is allowing themselves to be vulnerable enough to hurt each other's feelings, not maliciously. Right? That's not a loving relationship. Not because you're mad or because your feelings are hurt or because you're lashing out. But sometimes the speaking of truth hurts feelings. And it should. And if we're going to be a free society, we've got to be able to engage in very passionate conversation and admit when, boy, that causes me to really think through this issue. Matter of fact, another little quick story. I had a small debate online with a friend today. And I was talking about a real tragic experience. Today, our good friend, Gabriel Joseph, his trial ended. And he was convicted on all 5 counts that he was charged with. Now, what the news won't tell you is that he was charged with many, many, many other counts that he got dismissed and beat long before the government got to this point. But nevertheless, a jury of his peers convicted him. Very tragic experience for a dear friend. And I'm not going to go into my Tom Harvey tirade again, except for to say that he's a lousy, anti-intellectual, non-truth teller, non-good journalist who is going to have to answer in a court of law for the damage, the unjust damage that he and his newspaper do. But leaving all that aside, did I say I wasn't going to say anything about it?
I didn't hear.
What he won't tell you, but he's gloating in this tragic situation that Gabriel was found guilty. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, half of me wants to stop. I don't want to do the radio show tonight. I know we just relaunched it. I want to go away and feel sad for my friend because it's tragic, and the consequences. What's already happened is tragic, and what has happened now and what will unfold is just difficult. And half of me just wants to go be sad. And the other half of me gets so worked up that I want to wage war, to quote my friend Sean Whalen. I want to wage war. And there's those two sides of me. And what you have to realize is in 2015, there is no path of quietness if you want to be free, if you want to stand up for liberty. And the best way to honor my friend Gabriel is to realize he has paid a price for freedom. And contrary to what Tom Harvey says, and sadly, I wasn't there in the courtroom, and that's a long story. The arguments that were presented to the jury, I don't love those arguments, but leaving all that aside, there's a reason Gabriel was singled out. We found in the court documents in my case that there were hundreds of people involved in real estate transactions that the government could go after. There are all kinds of people who are not criminals that broke federal law in getting loans and still do to this day that don't know it. Matter of fact, I have a friend named well, I won't mention his name because I don't have permission. But I have a friend not related to me and not part of my business or anything, but someone who I've worked with, an attorney to help, who's recently been charged with multiple felonies and financial transactions where everybody made money and everybody was paid as agreed, but he pissed some people off in the government who had connections with prosecutors, and away they come. And what you don't realize is, obeying the law is impossible in many instances in the white-collar world. So anyway, with all that said, the reason Gabriel was singled out, and what we found and what the government's documents say, is the reason he was singled out among all the many people associated with me. Remember, the government was coming after me. And there's a reason the government came after Gabe. At first, it was because they thought maybe Gabe, would testify against me by making up some garbage. I mean, I think, in the beginning, maybe they thought there was some truth to their allegations, but by the end, they knew there was no truth to these ridiculous allegations, but they just kept putting pressure on him. And when he wouldn't lie, they ratcheted up the charges. And if you want to understand the truth, and I'm just telling you the truth, in the government's memos, I can show these to you. Maybe we'll put those up on freecapitalist.com sometime. They did it as part of a strategy to align the public opinion against me, because Gabriel was a personality on Free Capitalist Radio. Right. And their stated goal in the government planning strategy memorandum, back when it was just the state of Utah, their goal was to put Free Capitalist Radio off the air. And I mean, you can't, it was, do you understand what I'm saying to you? Do you understand? This is not some textbook. This is not some, person in Washington, D.C. These were petty bureaucrats in the Rocky Mountain West who got ticked off at us because of our political agenda, and then they went out and looked for a way to use the law to stop us and to accuse us of crimes that they had no evidence of, and this is the result. So regardless of the specific details, in a very real sense, the reason Gabriel Joseph is paying this severe price is because he stood up for freedom and added his voice to the cause of freedom. And the best way you can honor that is to not be a coward yourself. Because the more of us that stand up, the more of us who look these unprincipled and in many cases wicked men and women in the face and say, that is enough, okay, we won't all get to win. It reminds me of what Ben Carson said about that shooting tragedy not long ago, where this shooter walks into the classroom, and right. These schools have been teaching everybody kind of huddle together in a bunch and hope they don't get shot or hide under desks. And Ben Carson says something that I think I had told you
said the exact same thing
right before the news came out. I said, man, and no disrespect intended, and who knows what you would do in the fog of war, so to speak, in that tragedy. But I said, I would like to think that I'm the kind of person that would have looked around like the people on that flight that crashed in Pennsylvania and said, let's roll, and say, hey, you, me, let's go get that sucker. Because if a few of us rush him, he might shoot us, but nobody else is going to die. We're not going to just sit here and take it. And that's how the freedom movement is. If you give into that little you, that side of you that says, I just want to go be sad. Or even worse, I just want to go try to make my little money and try to play my little golf and have my little sports car and have my nice little house so I can walk around in my nice little clothes and have my membership at the country club. To hell with you. You're not a capitalist. You're not an entrepreneur. You're nothing. You're nothing. You are a gang member of the moochers and looters who want to quietly pretend like you're not as dirty as them because you didn't do the prosecution, because you didn't do the persecution. We live in 2015, and the time has come, my friends, and if you never hear it from anyone else, let me say it to you. The time has come for each man and woman to decide whether they're going to stand up. There's no other way around. So you go back to this story at Vassar. That's the problem. That's the context. They're trying to make it so the words I'm speaking and the words you're speaking, because they cause people to feel consternation and feel bad, which is, by the way, how change happens. It's how nonviolent revolution happens. It's how peaceful transformation and progress happens. They want to make that illegal because they control the force. No, I don't mean the force like Star Wars. I mean the guns. And what they do is, if you violate those codes, these, hate speech codes and all this nonsense, if you violate that, they call campus security and come grab you by the throat and put you in some place where you don't want to be by force. And that's what's happening. That's what's wrong with it. And they're using force as a demonstration by ripping up the Constitution. Now, that's the first problem. Second problem is, I think a lot of parents who are borrowing $20, $30, $40, $50,000 a year to send their kids to schools like these schools, some of them have the best reputations, oddly, in the country. I think parents should know about that. And let me just say it to you, stop it. Especially those of you who are my age or older, who have college-age children. It is not a virtue to borrow $20, $30, $40, $50,000 to send your kid to a school that's going to rip up the Constitution and make sure their feelings aren't hurt. And that's another context. Whether they had the right to do it or not, it's a asinine, imbecilic, nonsensical idea that should not be subsidized by liberty-loving people. To quote the song from Jewel, not my Jewel, but the Jewel, the singer, don't lend your strength to that which you seek to be free from. So another reason to get this story out is to stop supporting these financial, tuition payments to these institutions. And then the last reason it's important is most of these outdated behemoth elephant organizations called universities are government subsidized ripe monsters. But for government guaranteed student loans, they wouldn't exist. So the asinine imbecile Bernie Sanders, who wants to give you more student loans and lower interest rates, even free tuition, think about this, you guys. Use your brain for a minute. I know you need more education. That's why you want Bernie to give you free student loans. I mean, secretly, not you, but your sister. Think about this. As soon as you say free tuition, you say no competition for dollars by the schools, and you allow these numbskulls who run schools like Vassar to continue to do these nonsensical things, to teach not the truth, to lead not in the right way, to destroy Western civilization and American society. Free tuition, you think about the student, that'd be so great. But free tuition doesn't mean free tuition. What it means is no competition in education. You get more behemoth institutions that don't have to compete for dollars. They just get federal dollars. There's always another side to the socialist ploy. If you want to figure out how to beat a socialist in an argument, don't take the bait and argue about the ends. I want free tuition too. I want free tuition. Capitalists are the only hope for free tuition. Matter of fact, I've given more free tuition, to paraphrase Brigham Young, and to speak in actuality, I've given more free tuition to students at all levels than anybody I know. I gave free tuition to hundreds of students for private school as a capitalist. You see, capitalists put their resources where it makes the most sense, and it's the capitalists spending their own resources, true capitalists. So, that's why that story piqued my curiosity and interest, and that's the debate some of you might want to have on the internet with your friends, and why tearing up the Constitution by itself, yes, you might have the right to do it, but you also have the moral obligation to be responsible for your arguments and your advocacy in society. And there's a more sinister plot, right? The goal is to silence the spreading of ideas in academic institutions like these, because they want to pigeonhole people like me and people like you and call us radicals and call us crazies and call us terrorists. Well, how am I a terrorist? Well, because your words hurt me. Well, my friends, I know it's dangerous to say this, but I hope to heck my words do hurt you sometimes. And especially your sister and your brother-in-law and your neighbor and your dad, right? Because it's through that pain that your ideas might get rearranged. And someday you might send me a Christmas card. I want to send a shout out to my friend on Facebook who sent me a message, Mr. Roberts, Tracy Roberts. He sent me a message. He said, Rick, when I first met you, first started listening to Free Capitalist Radio, I was a slave, but I am now free. Thank you. And, there are times when you get out of the rat race because your brain is turned on and you've been associated with like-minded people, or to quote Brandon from last night, with right-minded people, not left or right, but correct-minded people. You'll thank me for rattling your cage a little bit. I remember Jewel saying to me, right after a Free Capitalist Radio episode, not long after we first started Free Capitalist Radio, she sent me this letter telling me how her feelings and judgments had gotten offended, and she was kind of taking me to task, and we engaged in a great debate on Free Capitalist Radio, and that debate has borne fruit in a very literal
Quite
sense.
literally.
That's right. By the way, for the record, we're still wondering who won that debate. I'm not. Someone won, and the fruit is good, but we still need to figure out who won that. I think obviously. I mean, I'm the free capitalist, and I'm still on the air, and she's not writing me letters anymore. So I think I won the debate. Is she on there?
I saw at least on.
I don't know. Are you guys getting disconnected from Periscope? I see people coming on and off. Are you guys getting disconnected sometimes? Remember, give me some hearts. The hearts help make it popular. Matter of fact, Dr. Patterson up in Idaho, Baden, shout out to you. He was telling me that he gets Periscope. A wife is always right. Oh, Brad, you know, Jewel, that's no fair. But sometimes it's worth adopting that strategy. But anyway, what is it? Well, there's a Periscope app on the new Apple TV. And we want to keep getting those hearts up so we can be featured, get more listeners, and get more people turning their brain on every night at 10 o'clock. So also, don't forget, swipe up, invite friends, use the Periscope app, get them to join us here. Get them to follow @FreeCapitalist on Periscope. Now, that's just one news story. There's another news story from here in Utah that's really relevant, and that is a federal judge just really delivered a significant blow to this Count My Vote campaign, where the Republican legislature here compromised with an initiative campaign led by a bunch of establishment Republicans to try to get rid of the caucus system here in Utah. And if you don't know about the caucus system, it's one of the closest surviving frameworks that is similar to Jefferson's ward system, which is the real path forward to liberty that still survives in the United States. And the enemies of freedom are trying to gut it, some of them naively, some of them quite diabolically. And my good friend and my attorney, Marcus Mumford, was leading the fight in federal court. And the judge just today delivered a very significant blow to that law. And boy, the liberals and the numbskulls and the deceivers are going to work with their PR spin, talking about how it's okay, we didn't lose, we really won, we didn't lose, we really won. When you think through the implications of this decision, you'll see it's a great victory for freedom today here in Utah on the Count My Vote legal case. So shout out to Marcus Mumford, and a little free advertising for him. If you ever get your butt in a sling and you need some legal advice, Marcus Mumford in Salt Lake City be a great place to turn. All right, so let's see, where are we at with time? We see without bumper music, I don't even know where we're at with time. Okay, 10:39. Let's take a look. We got any comments on Uber conference or messages? You guys are all just, happy to listen. Is that the case? Let's see.
Just enjoying it.
All right. Oh, look at Feel the Love. You guys are just, are you going to sleep? Are you guys laying in bed, letting Free Capitalist Radio be your bedtime music? Well, let's talk about, I was thinking about doing one other news story, but, Brad, he said, yep. Well, I'm going to start waking you up. Yeah, Free Capitalist Radio is supposed to wake you up, brother.
Yeah, wake up and turn your brain on.
Wake up, Bradley. Wake up. Matter of fact, we've got to do a little conversating, my friend. We need to do a little conversating. By the way, did you know the story about the fella who developed and implemented and marketed the 5-hour energy drink?
Billions and change.
Woo! 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 Woo!
I've officially moved on from Red Bull to 5-hour energy.
Man, oh man! If we'll talk more about that. Hey, somebody asked me if I was still doing real estate. Not only am I still doing real estate, we're gonna do the whole. Here's the truth: the government doesn't want you to know about how to use real estate to start liberating yourself financially. And so, if you're interested in the real estate training, let me just tell you, we got it for you. And you better get in contact with us. And I'll show you how to use that thing. And, you don't want to brand yourself as a student of the Free Capitalist, but you should be a student of the Free Capitalist and go out and use that training to get yourself free. You see, because you have to understand, there's a whole segment of the ruling class that doesn't like and is skeptical of anyone who talks about freedom. Because they like freedom so long as you'll admit you get it from them. As soon as you start to investigate that you can be free, hear what I'm saying. As soon as you start to investigate that you can be free, rather than pander for freedom from them, you become a threat to that system. I was watching Garrett Gunderson in his recent interview with Robert Kiyosaki, and I found that quite interesting. Congrats to my friend Garrett, by the way, for for securing that opportunity to do that interview. And I thought it was very interesting in that interview how they made an interesting comment. They said, they were talking about how, hey, we don't want to work with you if you're poor or if you want to be middle class. That doesn't work for us. They said, you should go follow Susie's advice, Susie Orman, or you should go follow Dave's advice, eat beans, right?
Beans and rice, rice and beans.
Beans and rice and beans. And, go put your credit cards up on your freezer in a block of ice. Because if you want that kind of life, that's good advice. But there is a life outside of scarcity. There is a life that I call the life of liberty. And if you want that life, you are breaking with the established order. If you want that kind of life, you are a threat to the established order. And if you want to stand up for freedom, my friends, you have to own that that's a threat to the established order. All right, how many families are at Liberty Reef being brain on? Well, good question. Good question. How many families are here, or how many families are being brain on? We'll talk specifically about Liberty Reef, Anne-Marie, privately, off-channel. But you want to consider coming to Liberty Reef. It's a good consideration. But let me tell you, it is not easy up here, because standing up for freedom is not easy. But boy, it is good. And I said to you, Kimball, was it this morning? I said, I was listening to last night's broadcast, and I said, well, I forgot, there is something easy about being up here at Liberty Reef. Breathing.
Yeah.
The air and the quiet. When we got done with the radio show last night, and I walked outside, and the sky was midnight black, midnight blue, and the stars were just vibrant, and the air was still. And as I breathed in, it was as if I was breathing in freedom. And I know that there are secluded places like that all over this great land, but they are not many. And I'm very grateful to be here. Hope some of you will come and consider visiting with us in Liberty Reef. Now,
so before you move on, I had a thought as you were going through that.
I don't know if you guys can hear Kimball, but talk louder if.
So you were mentioning that you become a threat to them when you become free.
Yeah.
And I would also add to that and make it very clear, your message from 10 years ago still rings true. You have to be free in order to be a threat. It's not just that you get to be a threat and they are scared of you, but they're not going to be scared of you.
Well, that's true. There are a lot of people who disagree with the things we say because they look at their life experience and they say that doesn't match. And I say, well, because you've amounted to nothing in the cause of freedom. You're not free. And until you get free,
right.
They're your best friends.
Right.
The truth sets you free, but it also puts you in a position of great stewardship because being free is not easy. And the truth is not easy. The other thing is you can't be free if you're destitute. Okay? If you're in physical destitution. If you can't feed yourself, if you can't clothe yourself, you're not free. And quit kidding yourself. Freedom takes work. Freedom takes production. Freedom takes a willingness to fight. Oh, I forgot to tell you, I got into this conversation with a friend of mine with this debate online. And I said, sometimes ideas are uncomfortable. And I said to him, he said, which side did you choose? He said, so are you going to go away and be quiet or are you going to wage war? I said, I'm going to wage war. And I said, there's a problem, however, with waging war. And I'll just be real personal with you. My heart does not enjoy what that means. But, I take no pleasure in labeling people like Francine Gianni with the truth. I take no pleasure in looking at Wayne Klein and seeing, Gollum in living form. It's fun to pick on him, and it kind of distracts from the real sadness because I know what they do to people like me and you and to people like Gabe. I know I've worked now in the legal community long enough. I see the lives that they hurt and the dreams that they damage. And we live at a time, my friends, where war is here. And right now it is not a shooting war, thank God. But it may very well become a shooting war. And my heart, I have a much more tender heart than I like to admit. But there's no way I can use my talents fully in the work that needs to be done by by giving in to tenderheartedness. A friend of mine said, well, didn't the Savior have a tender heart? And I said, all right, fine. But there's something else that goes along with it. You know, when you're cracking a whip, you know, everybody talks about this emasculated Jesus, you know, we should all be nice. And I agree, we should all be nice. But there's a time when you look at a hypocrite and you call him a hypocrite. There's a time you look at a leader who's not leading and you call him a viper. There's a time when you look at people who know better, who oppress the poor, and who rally in wickedness, and who engage in deception. It's not tender-heartedness that rules the day in those exchanges. Oh, it's true. I admire when the Savior says to those who crucify him, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. But it is not our calling to go like lambs to the slaughter. In 2015, it is our time to stand up for freedom, stand up for the cause of this great land. There is a work to do. There is a revolution to finish. And this revolution requires those who are willing to, with their minds on and their morality engaged, to stand up for freedom. And that's not easy, my friends. But it's possible. And there are great blessings. And the only path to happiness and prosperity and peace is through those doors. That's why there are few there be that find it. You know, we talked last night about the 7 flaxen cords, and I really hit religion pretty hard. I want to talk about all 7 for just a minute. Let me just see how much time we got left here on Free Capitalist Radio. We've got about 12 minutes left. I want to talk about those 7, and I want to use the calendar as a framework, and I want to just invite you to take an inventory of your own life in terms of the bondage that you're living in. And I want to talk about the rat race, and the rat race is the day-to-day grind that consumers live in. The rat race is the consumer condition. The rat race is living somebody else's life, living by rules that aren't principles, doing things that you feel like you have to do or you're supposed to do, but you don't really believe it, because deep down you know something's wrong. The rat race is when you want something that's bigger and grander, but somehow you've been trained, taught, and educated to shrink and hide, and that somehow humility means not being passionate and not building and not creating. And the rat race is the lie. It's the deception. It's Truman in the Truman Show, right? It's Neo in the Matrix. It's this idea that somehow you have to live within limits and that you can fulfill what you're here on the earth to fulfill without buying into a deeper moving cause. And it's a lie. The rat race is a lie. And so the reason the truth can set you free is because the truth invites you out of the rat race. And to get out of the rat race, there are 7 cords that tie you down to, I mean, there's millions, right? But there are 7 categories of cords that tie you down into the rat race. And so I want you to take an inventory and see how much of a slave you are in these 7 areas. I'm going to use the week as a model. I'm going to start with Sunday. I said last night in the broadcast that religion is the first area where most people are in bondage. And that's true even for those of you who don't go to church. It's true for those of you who don't even know what religion you are. It's true even for those of you who think you're atheists. Because religion, by religion I mean the ideas that motivate you, the moving cause within you, your understanding, your worldview, your framework. And the enemy of true religion, of truth, is mysticism. This idea that there isn't a reason for things. It's the pre-enlightenment mentality that says, yeah, the people in power are right. It's Thrasymachus's view in Plato's Republic that justice is the interest of the stronger. It's Donald Trump's view that, you know, you just go in there and you win the day by telling people what to do. By the way, that's not an insult to Donald Trump directly. I actually like a lot of the things Donald Trump says. But his political philosophy is sorely in need of development. And that's not a unique argument for any of those people. And among all of them, I'm glad that Donald's rattling some cages. But there's this idea out there that somehow might makes right and that force is good. And then the civilized among us and the democratic socialists like Bernie, they lie to you and say, well, you know, if the majority of the people want it, it's good. There's a stupid video going around Facebook that I see a lot of you clicking like on. That talks about how bad and corrupt our system is, because it talks about how the correlation between the political influence that the average person has and the political influence that the rich have. And it shows this graph, and maybe I'll put a commentary on it on Free Capitalist Radio. It shows this graph, and it says, if 100% of the people want a law to pass, and it graphs on one side, the likelihood of that law passing versus the number or percentage of the people that should pass it. And it says, if 100% of the people want to pass a law, it still only is about 13% likely or whatever that it would pass. But even if only 10% of the people want a law, there's about a 13% likelihood that it will pass. And so it's got this flat line. It says the average person, doesn't have a very good chance of getting laws passed. And then it says, but look at the rich. If the rich want a law and, their line goes up and the more rich people want it, the more the law passes. And it says, see, we have got a bad problem. Well, we do have a problem. And the first problem is the brain off numbskulls who make graphs like that, who think they're standing up for freedom, who are really sowing the seeds of our destruction, and the people whose brains are off who like that and go, yeah, boy, that looks wrong. Because here's the fundamental immoral, wicked principle behind that. And that's the idea that the standard of what is right is majority rule. The standard that, well, if all of us want it, we should be able to get it. Okay, well, think about that for a minute. If we were in a room full of 100 people and 99 of those people wanted a law that says you all get my bank account and you get to divide my checking account amongst all of yourselves, and you say, well, that's absurd because we don't want it. No, but it illustrates the point that just because 99 people would vote for something doesn't mean it should be a law, because the socialists want this idea of majority rule as long as they're the ones in the power who get to interpret the majority and tell you what a majority is and tell you who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's this graph which plays on your sentiments is really a brain-off way of making this argument that, we should just be able to do what we want. And the government's supposed to represent us, man. And if we all want something, the government should give it to us. And I'm not telling, corporatism's horrible. And the manipulation of corporate interests in our government and the unholy alliance between paid and bought for politicians is evil. But what's worse is the bad mentality, the bad ideas, because this revolution for liberty is only going to succeed if we can organize a group of people who have good ideas. Okay, good sentiment won't cut it. Good party membership won't cut it. Good cultural ties won't cut it. Good church relationships won't cut it. Good school relationships won't cut it. If you're thinking bad, if you're thinking poorly, you are rats in the rat race. And my friends, that graph and that video is mouse food. It's cheese, and you're eating it up, and you're going to get smacked on the head unless you wake up and turn your brain on. Might does not make right. Majority rule is not the answer. Principled government. This republic was built on the idea that no matter how many people voted for something, some things are still wrong. Think about that. Now, going back to the 7 flats and chords, I said to Kimball, I was disappointed in my broadcast yesterday because I wanted to get through all 7 and I wanted to be more detailed. I got 6 minutes. Let's see if I can dedicate about a minute to each of these. The problem with religion, it's the first day of the week. It's your day of reflection. It's where you look, do you have a worldview that's based on principle? Do you know how to articulate your principles? And for most of the answer is no. And some of you like the 13 principles of prosperity. I highly recommend them to you because that's where you start. That's your bellwether. That's your barometer. Those are 13 basic rules that apply to all areas of your life. And if you really dig through them, they're not just about making money. They're not about prosperity in the sense of big bank accounts, though they do include temporal prosperity. They talk about thriving as human beings. And so whatever church you go to, whatever religious doctrine you subscribe to, the enemy of principle is mysticism. The idea that, there is no such thing as what's right. It's just, what we all get together and kind of think is good. Okay, so where are you at with religion? Are you selling your kids Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and then telling them to pray to Jesus? Okay, is that what you're doing? You wonder why kids, when they turn into teenagers and young adults, they have crises of faith because you've trained them, taught them, and educated and prepared them for these socialists. And you expect them to tell the difference between the guy who you prayed to who helped you find your pen that you lost behind the couch and the tooth fairy who brought them free money under their pillow. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I believe in miracles. I believe in divine intervention, but I believe it's because there are truths that govern this universe, and that it's by obeying those truths that we receive all the blessings we receive, whether they look like miracles to us or not. Or to paraphrase the scripture, there's a law irrevocably decreed in the heavens before the foundation of this world, and that we want those blessings that we seek, we've got to obey those laws upon which those blessings are predicated. That's Rick 1, just a little paraphrase. Like Nephi quoting Isaiah. Just
Principle
make it.
1.
Yeah, principle 1. God is the author of prosperity. Okay, number 2 in education. The problem with education is paternalism. Right now, you don't own your education. Here's the inventory question. Are you embarked right now on a disciplined course of education? Are you reading every day? Are you writing every day? Are you speaking every day? If you're not doing those 3 things, reading, writing, and speaking, you're not involved in a principal course of education. Number 2, are your children reading, writing, and speaking every day? That's the first test. Now, the second test is, what are you reading, writing, and speaking about? Is it principled? Is it part of a curriculum that's oriented towards a liberal arts education? Number 3, who's in charge of administrating what you're reading, writing, and speaking about? Okay? Those 3 things for you and your children explain why you're in bondage to education. Because if you fail any one of those tests for yourselves or your children, which by default includes most people's approach to education, you're in bondage. You're in the rat race and you can't get out. Number 3, government. You know, most of us don't even really know what government is. Most of us think of the legislature. Sometimes we think of the presidents and the governors, but there's a bigger problem. The bigger problem is advocacy. The role of citizenship in government includes advocacy. And the test there is, do you advocate? Do you have an advocacy strategy personally? Do you know how to stand up and make a meaningful contribution to the health of your governments? Starting with your family government, and then your neighborhood and community governments, and then your state, your county, your state, and your national governments. Do you have a personal understanding, view, and strategy of how you personally are playing a role in that system? Deliberately, intellectually, on purpose. Number 2, can you resist tyranny to any degree? Do you know how to personally resist tyranny by the government? Starting in your family. Do you know how to identify tyranny in your home and how to resist it? Number 2, do you know how to resist tyranny in your broader family group and what to do in principle about it? Do you know how to recognize it? Do you know what to do about it? Number 3, do you know how to identify and resist tyranny in your neighborhood, in your local community? Do you know how to identify and resist tyranny in your county and in your state and in your federal government? If you don't, you're in the rat race and you can't get out. Just spinning and spinning and spinning, feeling good. Glad that some invisible hand gives you some water and some little pellets every day. And health. We don't have too much time to go into health, but I want to tell you something. And this is going to sound a little interesting. I want you to know I don't make any money selling anything in the health world right now. That's a dumb thing, by the way. But not yet, right? Kimball's going to make me a witch doctor. But I want to tell you something. Some of you know I've had some health challenges over the year. Several years ago, some of you know I was in ICU and almost lost my life. Some of you know how tragic that would have been and how hard that was for Jewel when she had just had a baby who was also in the NICU. And, I'd battled with an autoimmune condition. Some of you heard me talk about that. I want you to know from that day to this, I haven't had any recurrence of that battle with that autoimmune condition, and it's no accident. Number 2, some of you know I've had some other physical ailments, and I've been on a lot of prescription drug and prescription medication. I want you to know, and a shout out to my friend Nephi Boss, just who planted a seed in my head. I have been off of all prescription medication now for, I think, 2 years, maybe 2 years and 2 months. And one of the biggest problems with medical freedom and freedom in health is we get addicted to prescription medication. There's a study that came out today that shows that the majority of Americans are on at least one prescription, a majority of adult Americans are on at least one prescription drug regularly. And the number of those who are on 5 prescription drugs or more has doubled in the last 10 years. And so you're in bondage in your health if you're turning first and foremost to outside influences for your health and well-being. I love doctors. I'm grateful for doctors. I love that prescription medicine exists. I'm grateful for the medical advances in technology, etc. But like in the other areas, if we don't understand our stewardship in the world of health, we're in bondage. And you're in the health rat race if you don't understand your role in both medicine and wellness in your home. That one's a little harder. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the near future. Prosperity. If you don't understand money and the 5 pillars of prosperity, if you don't understand human life value and the relationship to the property value, if you don't understand the purpose of entrepreneurialism and you don't have a home economic plan, you're in the rat race, no matter how much money you're making. And no new job, no new paycheck's going to help you. So if you want to change that, and you want to get out of the rat race, you've got to break through your ignorance, and you've got to break through the deception you have about money, property value, and human life value. And then art and recreation, I'm just going to summarize those two together today. I'm going to say, if you don't understand the role that community plays in art and culture and recreation, and if you're not purposely involved in supporting community art, culture, and recreation, you're in the rat race. Now, why do I say all that? What's the purpose of all that? Am I out of time? God darn it. The reason I say all that is one of the things we want to do, besides broadcast every day, is we want to invite those of you who are serious and want to get out of the rat race to come join with us. We, as I mentioned last night, have reinitiated the Prosperity Quest mentoring. Some of you have already enrolled in Prosperity Quest mentoring in years past are going to be eligible to just pick that up where you left off with minor modification. And some of you who don't know what I'm talking about should inquire. If you want to get out of the rat race, if you want to get out of the rat race this year, and if you want to be free in those 7 areas so that you can be a free citizen, that doesn't mean life's going to be perfect. That doesn't mean crises don't come. It doesn't mean that life's not difficult, but it means you know where to fight. You can see clearly your sword and your shield are in your hands, and you can find, pursue, and achieve happiness by principle, and you're not playing the game of the racket. Now, last thing I'm going to say. I was watching a broadcast today between Alex Jones and Michael Savage. Interesting video. I have to tell you, I respect these men. Even though I disagree with a lot of the things I hear coming out of their mouths. And they're talking about how bad things are. And Matt Drudge was on Alex Jones not long ago talking about how within about a year or so, a United States Supreme Court judge told Matt Drudge that the internet basically is dead, that they're going to kill independent media within a year. And, this is, out of Matt Drudge's mouth, talking about a personal one-on-one conversation he's had with a Supreme Court judge. That we don't have a lot of time to get the message of freedom out, he says. And then today, Michael Savage was talking about government zero, and he was talking to Alex Jones about this idea that the government's becoming less and less responsive to the people. And Michael Savage says, I'm too old to lead a movement to save us. Because Alex Jones, who's really big, he's got a huge following in the liberty space. Alex Jones was saying, Michael, you're the elder statesman here on the radio. What do we do? What do we do? And he says, Alex, I'm too old. I can't lead the movement. But what we need is, if I was 40, I could lead this movement. And I started going, well, bozos, you haven't tuned into Free Capitalist Radio. Anyway, and but then it was horrible. And he says, here's what we need to do. We need to get a leader who will do the following things. We got to build a wall. We got to deport the people who are illegals in prison. We have to implement this law, and implement this law, and implement this law, and implement this law. And then Alex Jones was saying, hey, we did good. We got like 40 Tea Party people elected to the Congress, and the problem is the Republicans are a bunch of numbskulls, and so we need to get 40 more elected because pretty soon we'll have big enough numbers that we can win. And I wanted to say, if I could sit down with them, I would invite them right here to Liberty Reef to sit in those 2 chairs, and I would say, brethren, thank you for all the work you do. Could I please share something with you? And I would reach into their mind, and I would play them the musical scales of freedom a little bit more poignantly than they have seen before, and I would show them that the solution is not in electing a leader to pass laws. That will come. We must have that happen. But the path from here to there is to build this movement, and to build a movement of people who are getting out of the rat race, and then who are networking and building power from a principled foundation. And we can do that in a few short years. My friends, if you would wake up and turn your brain on and join with me, we can spread this virally and quickly. And that's my challenge for you tonight. Get someone to listen to Free Capitalist Radio tomorrow. Get someone to come and join with you tomorrow. Meet me back here, same time, same place at 10 p.m. Because this movement is not about Rick. This movement is not about any individual. This movement is about each of us. It's about you and your home and your livelihood and your passion, your dreams. And I want to be in it with you. And right now I'm speaking to you. I'm sending my voice out over 88.1 and over Periscope and over Facebook and over freecapitalist.com and over Uber Conference, because we can rally people and we can help people get out of the rat race, and we can help them commit to a path of a much different life. And by doing that, we can go down a path, and I can show you step by step by step the blueprint, and it would take just a few short years, and we would radically change the destination of this country and the cause of liberty. I believe it. It is important that we don't give up, that we don't get discouraged, but we've got to have our brain on, and we need to do some exercise mentally and intellectually. We're not safe, my friends, from some intellectual jostling, because we've got to refine our ideas in accordance with truth. And that's the cause of the free capitalists. That's the cause of freedom. That's the cause of liberty. So your assignment, everybody says, what do we do? What do we do? Don't ever say I didn't tell you. Step one, go get your friends and tell them about Free Capitalist Radio. Come join with us. And if you want to do even more than that, look for the announcement for the show tomorrow and start that conversation. Join with us. You've got some ideas. You've got some thoughts. Lend your strength to the solution, not to the things that you wish to be free from. This is Rick Koerber. I'm the Free Capitalist. Warm regards from Liberty.